Okay, how are we doing? Can anybody hear me? You here and able to head over into your session? Um,
I'm ready to start. I just wasn't sure if I should cut in. So, um, should I hang on for a minute or? Okay, okay. I just saw Dan's note in the chat. All right, thank you. I'm not unfamiliar with the technology issues, so so thank you so much for that introduction, Dan. And I'm so excited to be here with all of you. If my sound at all gets fuzzy or anything, please let me know in the chat. I'll monitor that throughout my talk today. So I thought about this particular prompt. I'll kind of tell you a little bit about my thinking and then a little bit about me and then where I go from here. So when I was looking into this prompt, my thinking was just kind of how vulnerable bubbles are and how we as individuals in many ways have so much in common with them. Our life is ephemeral. It's very difficult to sustain, you know, quality certain moments in our lives. And so I was thinking just about that sort of vulnerability. And I thought at first of my own health and how sometimes that is always tense. I'm one of those people who kind of looks like nothing's wrong, but stuff's going on. so it was so kind of that's where I started with this, but it also led me to consider the fragile kind of bubbles we have with those that we love. And I had this whole plan in mind, and then last week I totally changed it because my uncle passed away. And so like that really kind of changed my sort of idea and perception of what bubbles mean to me. So I'll get into that in a little bit. But I'll give you a little about my background as well, so you can sort of see where I'm coming at, this particular approach, in terms of the lenses I'm using. So I am, I was born and raised in California. I'm from Oceanside. So if you are familiar with that part of the state, it's just south of Camp Pendleton, which is a military base. And so it was, it was a very interesting space in which lots of different cultures kind of converged, with military families kind of coming in and out of the general city area. And so I grew up for the first 20 years of my life in that space. And so then I moved to Los Angeles. I had gone to community college and then transferred. And I went to California State University, Northridge, to get my bachelor's and master's degrees. That's actually where I met Stacy Holman Jones. And so I had an opportunity to really stretch and understand like what performance means to me. My master's thesis was an autoethnography on grief and loss. And I wrote about the passing of my father was unexpected. And that happened literally right at the start of my graduate program. So like I was 2 months in and still figuring out what it is to be a grad student and, a TA. And at Cal State Northridge, our, Sakina Jangbar's here, show me that we were instructors of record. So I had 2 kids of, a phone. I was assisting and yet, trying to figure that out. I was trying to figure out grad school, and then this happened to me with my dad passing away. So I wrote to process that through my thesis, and so that was a really cathartic process. And then in my PhD program, I studied culture specifically. I looked at online cultures and people's projections of the self. So it wasn't an autoethnography for my dissertation, but I would say in many ways it extends the sort of interests I had in my thesis, in that I looked at how people, sort of self-narrativize their own, thoughts about specific issues. And I looked at, 3 case studies to see, how they did that. So this idea of autoethnography has sort of been in my mind for years. And has really helped me as a sort of therapeutic process in understanding and figuring out sort of my place in the world, a little bit about, the kind of work that I do as well. And also just to put this out there and at the outset, I use the she, her, hers pronouns. And I have, my family heritage is mostly German and Italian. I'm just kind of becoming acquainted with that and sort of reconciling my own sort of history and background. So a little bit of that is also in my discussion today. So all of these things kind of came together to really develop this project that I'm working on. Actually, I have several projects going at the same time. And it really made me think about how vulnerable life is. And that's, for me, what bubbles reflect, and what we, why we should also value bubbles in that way. So I will start with telling you a little bit about, my uncle and the vulnerability of that relationship, and how that really reflects, the sort of way I looked at, or I kind of saw that relationship, also what I've learned from it, most importantly. So I've really thought about bubbles in the sense of when they pop. Obviously my goal throughout my whole life, and the sort of relationships I had with my family members, was to maintain that bubble, to avoid it from popping. Meaning, I didn't want them to end. I always wanted it to be sort of an everlasting process. And that was actually the way I approached the loss of my father. I felt like writing my thesis gave me the opportunity to continue a relationship with him, even though he can't reply in the way that I'm used to. And so it's also an opportunity to think about how a bubble can be reconstructed in that way. That when he passed away, and this was in October of 2010, I had never lost someone that close to me. I mean, I'd lost grandparents that I hadn't known very well, and I was very young at the time. But this was one of the most significant losses I'd had in my entire life. And so it was one of those moments of a bubble literally popping, and I had no idea what to do with the pieces. And so when I was writing that thesis, I kind of mapped out really what I went through, and the kinds of things that we should have done differently. Meaning we had, my family and I had no idea what we were doing. And so we really sort of aimlessly made plans and took much longer with it, that it really kind of hampered and was a problematic way of dealing with our grief. And just there's so many things that I've learned from that. And so fast forward about 11 years, and now I found out last Monday that my uncle passed away, and this is my dad's oldest brother. And he was a very a challenging person to be around, and I say that with as much grace and love as possible. He was one of those people who learned what boundaries meant. He would invade my face, and there was this one thing, my mom actually doesn't even remember this happening, but there was this one incident that happened multiple times actually, where he would cup his hands over my ears and pick me up by my head. And it's very painful. Yes. And so, and he did it, out of the purview of my parents. So they didn't know what was going on. And so, being a little kid, I thought that, I shouldn't say something. It was, what all the wrong things happened there. And so that's just a small snippet of sort of our relationship. It was very one way, in the sense that he, would do things for his own enjoyment, and I was almost at the expense of it. So and I don't want to say this is like a reflection of him as an overall human being, but I'd say that was a reflection of our relationship. And so when I found out he passed away, it had been about 10 years since I'd seen him. And that's a pretty big deal for our family in general, because, we would try to see each other regularly. My dad was in many ways the person that made sure that would happen. And, he'd had many issues with my uncle, and his oldest brother, 11 months older than him. My dad was always the one having to set up arrangements and see family and things like that. And so oftentimes that was one way as well. And so I hadn't seen my uncle primarily because he had cut himself off from all of us. I still am not completely certain why. It may have been his grief process. I'm not sure completely, because I never heard it directly from him. But so I hadn't seen him in 10 years, and it was just sort of this strange learning of his passing was sort of this strange moment of a different kind of bubble popping. And I felt like, you know, when that news was broken to me, that I felt a different kind of loss, in the sense that I know that I'm not able to have a relationship with him, and I felt like it was problematic at the start, and so with that in mind, I'm actually going to be changing my virtual background sometimes, so, for various reasons. But I really felt like, you know, kind of it was on fire. Literally everything was that we had in terms of our relationship was never going to be fixed, and it was essentially burnt down with this loss. And so it felt like there was this barrier he put up, and I never understood it, but he created sort of his own somewhat toxic bubble that he never wanted to leave. And he sort of left us to sort of figure it out on our own, in a sense, without him. And so in talking with with one of my cousins, who I actually never met until about 2 years ago, he is my uncle's oldest son, and he's from my uncle's previous marriage, which ended very badly. And so he was telling me all sorts of things that I didn't know about my own uncle. And it gave me sort of a general sense of why he did things that he did. And really ultimately led me to, understand why that bubble was fragile to begin with. He had a very challenging past, meaning he had some violent tendencies. I'm not going to go into too much depth there to, out of just to protect your own safe space, but just know that it wasn't healthy, and it was really a situation that led me to not know part of my family for a very long time. So ultimately, this sort of dynamic has led me to think about bubbles in a way that not only challenged my sense of what vulnerability means, but also to protect the bubbles that are closest to me. And it's really, it's really something that I, questioned for so many years. And so one of the things that really was very, very useful for me, it's actually a TV show that I had watched, and I know that I sound like I'm meandering, but I do have a point here. I've watched a lot of different grief and loss, mostly to help my own process. One of which that has helped me the most is the U.S. program, The Good Place. It actually starts with this scene in the background here where it says, "Welcome, everything is fine." And it helped me kind of think about what it means when that bubble for each of us pops, meaning when we do leave this planet, whatever it is what happens, in the end. And so it kept me thinking, from this experience with my uncle, what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind? What sort of connections do people want to make with respect to the mark that I and my family members, leave on the world? And so when I thought about bubbles, it also made me return to poetry. And I also, years ago, it's been like, actually, I'm not old or anything, but it's been 25 years since I've written a song. That's a long time. And so it really gave me this experience of reflecting on The Good Place, reflecting on what it means to have a legacy, and reflecting on my uncle's history. I really wanted to sort of conceptualize that into poetry and song. And for the last about 2-ish years, really during the start of COVID and onward, I've had this refrain in my head that repeats over and over and over again. And so forgive my singing skills here, but it basically goes, "Where do you go, love? Where do you go?" Over and over and over again. So wondering, like, where do we go? Where does our what kind of legacy do we ultimately leave behind? That's really what the poetry and the writing I've been doing recently has focused on. And it's not so much about my legacy per se, it's more so about what do we as human beings leave behind. And I think one of the ways to start is through autobiography. And ultimately through practice of sharing our ideas, much like right now. And so I've been thinking also throughout all of this work about the ways in which we connect with one another. I'm not going to give away too much because I know this is something that Sakina Dangbar, who's here, and I are working on right now, and that is, thinking about how the past in many ways reflects the current moment. There is a story I'm actually working on with Sakina right now about a family friend that was very toxic and in many ways did some of the same things that my uncle did, to an extent, and how my parents in many ways, didn't witness any of it, and I was too afraid to say anything. And how in many ways, certain men in my life were not there for me in ways that they should have. And so really reflecting on all of these ideas, it made me think of certain bubbles should just pop. And that really, I think, is one thing that I'm okay with now. I wasn't okay with before, because I'm thinking before about, kind of sustaining a relationship. It's always very much the sort of, like socialized people pleasing behavior that I learned growing up. That it's better to make people comfortable rather than question them. And so that notion of being okay with, being okay with things that are not okay is very problematic to me. And as an adult, I have become more and more okay, and especially recently, okay with that bubble popping. And there are some bubbles I want to maintain. Obviously, the safe, productive, helpful, conscientious relationships that I have in my life. Those bubbles I want to spend more of my time maintaining, whereas others I'm just going to allow them to pop. And I really feel like the more that I reflect on this, the more it makes me okay with that vulnerability of the bubble. That it means that even good moments will pass, good and bad. Means though the ones that we sustain should be ones that we attempt to maintain and sustain should be the ones that feed our soul, really give us that opportunity to grow as a human being. And I feel like all of this has really led me back to a framework that Tammy Fry created via Clifford Geertz in her notion of being here and there. That I can reflect back on what once was, meaning the kind of experiences I had with my uncle, with my dad via my thesis, and also, these members of my family and friends that have had influences on me. And the ways in which their influence should either be sustained or not. And I really I really implore us to think about what bubbles we want to maintain, but also what bubbles we want to just let go of. Eventually they'll pop on their own, but I think it's perfectly acceptable, as Elizabeth said in the chat. Not all bubbles have, rainbows in them. I really like that. If you don't mind me giving you credit, and I'll steal that if that's okay. But I ultimately think the main kind of goal behind the work that I've been doing recently and thinking about these past histories is to understand what happened. First of all, I think one of the first ways to understand them is to write about them, to talk about them like I am today, and all of us are talking about today, but also to then process them and critically analyze them, because some of these things that I've really unearthed over the last few months and during this research has really made me question what's okay and what bubbles just don't need to be there anymore. So the process of being there, going back to those moments, reflecting on or thinking about what happened and sort of revisiting those memories and coming back to the here, the now, and critically analyzing that sort of experience, I think is one of the most reflexive, cathartic, and therapeutic things that I've been able to do. And one of the reasons why I keep coming back to autoethnography, because it's one of those spaces in which this sort of work is not only allowed, but celebrated. So with that in mind, I just wanted to give you sort of another sense again of what bubbles represent for me. And I'll wrap it up because I know that I'm about to run out of time. But bubbles for me are a space, depending on what kind of representation they are, should be maintained whenever possible, but not every bubble is going to be one you should keep, maintain or in any ways allow it to, it's okay to allow it to pop. And there's nothing wrong with you if you allow it to pop. So I've definitely learned a lot about my own history through this, through really preparing for this conference, but also through conversations with family members, really giving them that opportunity to reflect also on their own experiences, to fill in also some of the gaps that I might have left behind. So, so there's still a lot more work to be done, to say the least. But I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity to spend time with all of you. And I look forward to hearing the other talks. So thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Juliana. It's Craig again, everyone. We're sharing some hosting duties in this session. People have seen in the chat, Dan's got a bit of connectivity. So just for now, I think we might go Corinna. I think you're the next
that's me.
one. Yep.
And
well, can I just throw straight to you and
yeah,
away
sure.
we shall go?
We can do that.
Yeah, before we start though, I start those words again. I just want to make sure that you're okay with the session being recorded.
That's fine.
Okay, thanks, Corinna.
Thanks.
Over to you then.
Great. Okay, I think we're ready. So there's 3 of us in this presentation, myself, Heather, and Kelsey. We're actually in 3 different locations, even though here in Utah we could have been in the same space, but logistically that didn't happen, and that's fine. So some of the images that we're using are actually of local spaces for you to be able to see a little of where we are and the context for the work that we're doing. And so we're talking about sensitive learning and teaching with arts and culture, and we're kind of connected in a bubble between one another across campus and also out into the school districts and with our local Indigenous peoples as well. So to start with, we'd just like to acknowledge that Brigham Young University sits on the ancestral homelands of the Ute, Paiute and Shoshone peoples, and that we acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, along with the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their homes in Utah today.
Kelsey, Corinna and I are all involved in the BYU Arts Partnership Native American Curriculum Initiative. And there are many bubbles inside of this program. We develop lesson plans alongside Native culture bearers, and we get a tribal seal of approval for every lesson plan that we publish and give out to teachers to use in schools. We also do professional development for teachers on culturally sensitive teaching and teaching about Native American culture through the arts and all the other content areas. They're integrated lesson plans. And then we also do professional development for Native artists who would like to be teaching artists and cultural presenters in schools. The goal is to amplify Native voices in the classroom, and we are seeking change in the world, not just to produce lesson plans. The guiding principles of our initiative have been developed over 2 or 3 years of partnership and relationship building with the 8 sovereign nations or federally recognized nations in Utah. And they are to embrace partnership and reciprocity, to know our own culture, to ask with genuine intent and listen attentively, to accept a no gracefully, to use accurate and original resources in history and the present, to allow the time needed for authentic growth, and to assume goodwill and to learn from our mistakes. These are the seals of the 8 federally recognized nations. We actually have 5 tribes, 8 federally recognized nations. It gets confusing because our flag has 6, and so we're trying to educate on what it means to be federally recognized. Brenda Bial is the director of the initiative. She is a Navajo Dene woman, and she's a retired educator of 35 years. She was hired to look at our lesson plans, and when she found culturally insensitive information, she took it to our director, and it was decided that those things need to come down and that teachers needed accurate and authentic resources in their classroom, and that's when we began asking tribes, what do you want the children in Utah to know about you?
So in relation with this initiative, our critical autoethnographic response was bubble up and through. Corinna with images and poetry, Heather with a dance video, and Kelsey with stories of collaboration and connection. Safe in bubbles. Bubbles combine and or pop. Separated, safe together apart with technology. Bubbles touch and open to knowing connection. Bubbles rise in Easter buns. Living culture rises. Working together for sensitivity and acknowledgement. Delicious, dangerous. Connecting our pedagogical community. We are looking for what matters.
As part of my study in the initiative, I've related it to dance. I'm a dance teaching artist, and we have the concept of self-space that we own, that the space our body takes up, and then the general space that we share with those around us, and then the relational space where you get lots of prepositions like over, above, between, through, side, and things like that. And so these are notes that I took in conversation with critical friends about what it means to know our culture, our self-space, to expand into understanding others and to relate and connect with them. Self-space. Me. My body. My student. My teacher. The human. General space. You, me, others, my family, my classroom, the geography. Relational space. Relationships. My community, our own society, our global society. You, me, and we.
Mama, Mama.
Bubbles shift across, streaming, dark shadows, bubbling away, under ice. Melting, awash with ideas for appropriate, not appropriated learning and teaching with arts and culture.
So what I have learned so far from working with the NACE project includes that there are so many ways that we can incorporate Native American culture into our classrooms that have incredible benefits to the children, teachers, and the communities around us. This includes teaching a wide variety of life skills and lessons in new and exciting ways. The Northwestern Shoshone Nation asked us to include their oral story entitled The Greedy Porcupine in our lessons. We worked with a drama teaching artist, and the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation to create a reader's theater script and incorporate it into Utah classrooms. So here is a short clip of grade 5 students here in Utah practicing this story.
wonder all those arrows? Ha! Now you talk to me. They are not needles, they are arrows.
And with that, porcupine let loose a few arrows was going to be much too quick for rabbit.
Yes, I'm out of here.
Porcupine became the golden pole. He shot at his arrows at any animal he thought appeared.
He even shot his arrows at his old friend Hummingbird.
Why did you shoot me? I thought it was your friend. Even though you weren't so brave enough.
I'm brave now. I'm bold. I'm powerful. I'm strong. Look out.
All the animals hid from her, even deer and elk.
The hunted one is not hungry.
He shoots arrows and show off his power. The squirrel decided to move far away.
I'm moving far away. Can't even live in the same forest as him.
Peter came back to visit Porcupine to see how his gift had been received.
Tell me, honey. Tell me of your experience.
Porcupine, who had become greedy and rude, demanded more.
I want sharp claws. I want big eyes. I want long legs.
You wonder all those arrows? Ha!
And so I learned that we can be brave and bold in our choices while still honoring the traditional stories of the Native American people. I learned that students are more capable of learning new and hard things. That sometimes something that I thought when preparing a lesson is going to be extremely difficult for fifth graders, like learning the correct pronunciation of words in a different language, ended up being something that they took very seriously and were proud to show me the following class. And so I would like to teach some of you all the words now. If you feel comfortable, I'm hoping that you will unmute yourself and practice these words with me. And so I'll say them and teach them to you, and then you can say them back with me. Okay, so the first is the Northwestern Shoshone greeting is how are you? And it's pronounced Hagai Nusinga. And so if everybody wants to unmute and say it with me, Hagai Nusinga.
Nusinga.
Hagai Nusinga. Hagai Nusinga.
Hagai
Hagai.
Yeah, and then
Singer.
Yeah, and then the short casual greeting of this, more like "What's up?" like "How are you doing?" is Hagan. Could you say Hagan?
Hagan.
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 Hagan. Amazing. And then in the story that we were working on with the North Shoshone people, we have a lot of animals. And so here's rabbit, which is pronounced gamu. Can you say that one?
Gamu.
Gamu.
And then I think this is the hardest one. It's hummingbird, and it's pronounced soying goi.
Soying
Goi.
And then this is my favorite one. Squirrel is zeep.
Zeep.
Yes, like very fast. Like yeah, zeep, zeep. Yeah. And then chipmunk is kuwiha.
Kuwiha.
Yeah. And then we have deer next, which is Iiyea. That was great. And then our last one is elk, and it's Padihia. Yeah, you all sound great. Thank you so much. So I have a question there at the bottom. Oracle. So I just want to know, how do I feel? What do I know differently when I speak a Native American language and when I really listen to Native American voices? And I think that this work is so important for children as they begin to learn about the world around them. There are histories that have not been included in our textbooks, and through the help of Native American bands and nations, we have been able to include so much more of this history of the peoples of this land on which we now live. Correcting the false narratives that surround Native American people is one step we can make towards a more equitable society. And I believe that children are more empathetic than we might anticipate, and they can learn, appreciate, and have a greater compassion for different cultures and what they bring to the beautiful mosaic of a world that we live in.
Lorraine Mariano Nichie. Doing research for the lesson plans has led us to many interesting people, places, and stories. A lesson plan on weaving led us to Lorraine Mariano, Navajo grandmother and master weaver, who shared with us her stories and wisdom. 2 weeks later, she passed away of COVID. This was a reminder of the proverb that when an old person dies, a library burns to the ground.
It's 86 old.
When I asked the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation what they wanted the children of Utah to know, they said, "Please tell the story of the Bear River Massacre." In response, we recorded the annual commemorative ceremony. We honor both the story they want us to tell and how they want us to tell it. This was the largest massacre of American Indians in U.S. history, even greater than Little Bighorn, and for years was erroneously referred to as the Battle of Bear River. The tribe recently purchased the property, making this the first year the ceremony occurred on Shoshone land. They are not just reclaiming the land, but the truth of their history.
We're still standing here, and we must all forgive, but we must not forget.
Later that day, the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers updated their 1932 memorial with a plaque that includes the Native voice. I witnessed the healing to the descendants of both the Shoshone and the pioneers. Over the next 2 years, we will develop lesson plans on the Bear River Massacre to share in schools. The arts can tell hard stories.
Being part of the history of Utah, we do have a story to tell. For right now, I think it's time.
So thank you, everyone. That's our bubble story.
That's 3 pieces of just wonderfully amazing work. Thank you for sharing that with us. Yes, can everyone just have a look down at your reactions button and send some parties or love or celebrations.
We appreciate the love.
And our next presentation is, forgive me, Iiyea?
GA.
GA, sorry, GA. Welcome. GA just messaged me to say she might have connectivity issues, so if your video shuts down, we will understand, but we look forward to listening to your presentation. Take it away.
So let me share my screen first. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So hello everyone. It's my pleasure to give a presentation at the Critical Ethnography Conference. This is my first time in here. My name is Jia Park and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Georgia. So I major in lifelong education and I pursue 2 certificates in a graduate level, which is one is the Women's Studies and the other one is in the Qual Studies. I will briefly introduce myself first before we go into it. So I was born in a small town in South Korea and I was raised in a really strict Catholic household background. So luckily I had opportunities living outside of Korea. So I was able to learn diversity and equality and inclusion since I was young. And these diverse experiences that helped me to realize the predominant inequalities that relate to gender. So in my doctoral studies, I primarily focus on adult learning and women's leaderships and gender issues in workplaces. So before exploring the point bubble and the conference, I searched the meaning of critical ethnography. So after reading the several different reading materials, I could describe the critical ethnography as analyzing my personal experiences to better understand the cultural context and events. So for the proposal of the conference, this conference, I wrote as the poem Bubbles has only 4 lines, but so I wrote as the poem Bubbles has only 4 lines, but it's very powerful. After working hard in my doctoral journey for 3 years, I faced burnout. Sadly, I slightly lost my passion and zeal, unlike what I had in my first year of PhD. So I was afraid of losing my voice and enthusiasm, but surprisingly, this short poem brought inspiration. So today I hope to go through my own experience as an international student in a doctoral program and describe how I lost my passion and voice during this journey. And after moving to Athens, I actively use my SNS to share my daily life with my friends and all over the world. So personally, I use my Instagram as a diary. So today I would like to share some of my Instagram postings to track my PhD journey and how I changed. So this is my first year, so I still remember the first day of moving to Athens, Georgia. I was 27 and I quit my job to start the PhD program. It was kind of like a gamble at the time, and I was willing to do anything because I was really exhausted after working in my underemployment. So Iiyea was my dream school back in 2018, and I had a graduate assistant orientation. I was so proud of myself. Joined the meeting as a GA. I was so thrilled to see my new cohorts, faculty members, and staffs in my department. I still remember the mood, air, and vibes of the day because I was so ready to start to learn new things. This was my 3rd time studying outside of home country. I have been feeling a little different at this time. Being a PhD student was very challenging, but I did not notice it. But I didn't notice it until the end of the first year. Maybe I was too excited of learning learning new things in a new environment. Although I had hectic schedules, I did not miss any school events like football, Korean community gatherings, and I even attended Indian night events. I also celebrate every single month of moving Athens. After a long, sweet summer vacation with my family in Delaware, I realized that, oh my, new semester again. So I knew how tough my first year of PhD was, so I was very afraid of what is coming in my second year of PhD. The second year of PhD was chaotic as I expected. I was desperately needed a time management skills to balance my upcoming comprehensive exam and work as a GA. In my second year, I started to take classes in women's studies department. I did a 3-hour lecture in a feminist theory courses, and it was just amazing. I never thought that I could do a long lecture, but mission completed. I knew that I was going to be extremely busy after the comp, so I did collaboration works and attended conferences and symposiums, as many as I can. While working super hard, I ignored my health conditions. I gained weight a lot and back pains. So I started to make an extra schedule for workout hour every day. I attended many recreational classes in Ramsey Center, which is for the gym, after classes with my friends, and it was super helpful for my mental health and my body conditions. Ironically, the summer was horrible but peaceful at the same time. The pandemic changed the entire international students' life, including me. I decided to go back to my home country, South Korea, for 1 semester. I was extremely stressed out about the racism during the whole summer. I only go outside once a week. Why? Because I saw how people stared at me in the grocery market, and I even had catcallings even inside of my apartment complex. Athens was not friendly and peaceful city for me anymore. So going back home, I was very hard because I did 2-week quarantine at home and I rarely see my family over there. Back home, I completed my woman's certificate and my prospectus. I became a PhD candidate. I don't have to introduce myself as a PhD student. It feels good. What if I was in Athens? Maybe I could not complete this at all because the insecurity and anxiety of my status. In spring 2021, I back to Athens. I passed prospectus defense and I started data collection for my dissertation. It seemed everything was just so perfect. However, I did not get the GA-ship offer letter for the first round at this time. It was because of the budget cut of the department and I was so miserable. And it was April 2021 and I remember that April was very stressful and desperate. Due to the budget cut after the pandemic hit, many of international students lost their TA or GA position, and one of my friends back to his home country due to the tuition. However, I could not just keep complaining of the situation, so I had to work on my dissertation. At this time, I decided to myself as I really need to complete this degree as soon as possible. So until the third year of my doctorate program, I was swamped with so many different schedules and unexpected happenings and trying to balance my work and life. During the hectic lifestyles, I lost the voice, passion, enthusiasm. I was burned out. I realized that I am not a girl back in fall 2018, which is my first year. What I have been forgotten. The poems and bubbles were like my mom in South Korea who prays for me every morning since I moved to Athens, Georgia. As I faced racism and desperate moments in my doctoral journey, I did complain about my status and my decision. But I also say that, Jay, appreciate everything. Think about people who support you. Think about yourself back in 2018. So the bubble also reminds me why I am in the doctoral journey. This beautiful and powerful poem made me to get my self-esteem back, self-confidence, and feel precious about everything in my life, even small things. It blew my mind and made me to have deep reflections beyond myself in the doctoral journey. So, although I faced many dramas and unexpected happenings in the past 3 years, I only have one more year and graduate. I read the poem in early spring 2021. It was like around April. And so I decided to enjoy my last year as a doctoral student. Why not? So I spent my summer in Korea to collect my data for dissertation. And I was so ready for last year in my graduate school. I knew that how much work waited for me in Athens as a fourth year student in PhD, but I told myself, no pains, no gains, let's do this. So for 3 years, I realized that, I could not find any enthusiasm and passion compared to myself in 2018. I tried to find self-esteem, self-confidence, and always remind where I started, why I am here. Things changed a lot after having a positive perspective in mind. So I was invited to a graduate assistant orientation as a guest speaker for all GAs in my department. Wow, I could not believe that what is just happening. Share my own experiences to others, it feels wonderful. I also try to love myself and love my body. So I registered a volleyball course because I love this. So, and I'm like 1000% enjoying it now. I love myself, following my voice, and do what I really love to do. This is the learning process of knowing myself and getting my voice back. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and feel free to give me feedback or keep in touch through my email. Thank you.
Thanks, Jaya. And if we can just use the reaction buttons down the bottom there and share some Share some love. Really, really powerful, evocative storytelling. Thank you for sharing. And I don't know if you're able to follow the comments in the threads. Lots of supporting comments, and I suggest coming from a place of deep empathy. So thank you for sharing and for documenting your journey. It was really powerful. So our session finishes at 12:30, and I'm up next. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, which will be that one there. Okay, and hopefully this works. So I heard Denise was driving 2 computers before. I'm going to try and drive 2 computers too as I work through my PowerPoint as well as read my script. So my presentation is titled Loving, Losing, Listening, Learning, Performing a Methodology of the Heart. I wondered about bubbles. I worried about bubbles. I worked within a bubble, without a bubble. I've withered inside and outside of bubbles. And then I wandered as I wondered, wandering, walking, working, working and walking and wandering and wondering. It was wonderful. But then I wondered if I was waffling about wandering while wondering, and was this wanderlust for wondering wantonly wasteful, and if truth be told, woefully wearing thin? This watershed awareness woke me to the wearisome weaponization of weighting words with "were" as a way to this whatever. I thought walking would be a method for finding a bubble, to trouble the bubble, perhaps to stubble the bubble, reduce it to rubble, and then, like an image from the telescope Hubble, discover a beautiful, big, banging Genesis. Would that be agreeable? Or would I be in trouble were I not to redouble the struggle and restore the bubble? I thought walking could be this agent's agency. I thought movement would be this activist's act. I thought a unit of action should activate understandings. I thought shifting my body through time and space, my body, this white, able, male, property-owning, non-Indigenous, colonizer language speaking body would shift time and space. That's how it usually works. This body, my body, in this time and place, this body, my body, functioning in this social and political space shifts time and place. That's how it usually works for me and this body. And I have previously walked this method, like Alexandra Kutcher, moving with and through in an arts-based walkography, and like Stacey Holman-Jones, who walked through bars listening to performances of torch singers, and like Robin Boylorn and Tanya Dunn, walking, talking, remembering. Our bodies navigating narratives like Dan Harris, Twice Upon a Place, becoming Aristotelian agents and arranging units of action, time and place. Our bodies shifting, transforming and transformative agents in our research. Alexander Kutcher writes, as I walk, I write, I inquire, I capture, I analyze and I draw, moving with and moving through. As such, this walkography is an entangled and enmeshed becoming. And she writes, silent and reflective, I keep walking through time, through memory, and through place. And then writing about her visit to the Anne Frank house, in this moment, the only thing that separates us from Anne's occupation of the place is time, only time. I stand next to Maiwa on traditional lands of the Jagger and Turrbal peoples, lands that were never ceded, they were stolen. And this place, at this place, bubbles float and flicker, actions of exploding experiences are rainbows to different times. And now I wonder less about wandering and about walking, and I wonder more about stillness and about listening. Dr. Miriam Rose of the Ngungawiri language group gifts us the word Dadiri. Well, this non-Indigenous body, my body, has no claim to Dadiri and Indigenous knowledge. But Dr. Miriam Rose says, and now I wonder even less about wandering and about walking, and I wonder more about stillness and about listening, contemplating stillness and listening to place. John Clandinin considers place as a concrete setting and site of inquiry, like descriptions of poker places in David Hayano's Poker Faces. And then Christopher Pullis posits place is one quality in autoethnographic writing that can connect writer and reader, and that autoethnographic writing evokes images of how things are or were, of people, places, events, memories, traumas, and emotions. And while reading David Purnell, I wonder if place might take a more activist role in human interactions, because Purnell writes about third places as sites of familial or communicable gatherings, where place serves to function for coming togethers and human interactions, which then foster constructions of social capital. And writing about torch singers, Stacey Holman-Jones critiques the spaces where torch singers perform, but also critiques the performative spaces between a torch singer and her audience. If I stop wandering and wonder about this place, if I'm still and listen to this place, can place be more than passive details in our autoethnographic writing? Can place be more than a site of inquiry? Can place be more than a device of spatial connectivity? Being the agent, being the activist, being performative, being contemplative, being a critical autoethnographer, I wonder, can place be the story? Can I, as a researcher, apply a methodology of the heart and be sufficiently still and listen with my heart and become a vessel for place to tell its story? Time does not leave space alone, Ron Pellias tells us in Methodology of the Heart. And Louise Gwyneth Phillips, writing in Research Through and With and As Storying, offers the term space-time mattering, in which each scene diffracts various temporalities within and across the field. Space-time mattering. Does this explain why, as an Australian, I can stand on the shores of Gallipoli, looking into the Aegean Sea and seeing the sea soaked with blood? My eyes sting, my chest chokes, my lips quiver, and my cheeks are stained with tears? While all the while, other tourists and Turks joyously splash and play in the calm and crystal waters. Rainbows of time, connecting bubbles of place. Space-time mattering. I stand in this body, my body, and I remember. At this place, in this bubble, 23 years ago. This body, my body, in a once-in-a-lifetime event. At this place. But at that time, space-time mattering. Performing a night of joy and love with my new wife from my new positionality and from my fresh title as husband. But at that time, memories of joy and love in a place filled with joy and a space filled with those we love and who 23 years ago loved and laughed and shared joy right back at us. Then, at this place, in this bubble, disturbed by time's rainbow, I'm shifted to 10 years ago at this place, this bubble, and a once-in-a-100-year flood. For this body, my body, was not here when the river lifted part of the restaurant from its moorings and carried it down the river, crashing it into the Merivale Street Bridge and onwards further and out to the bay. This body, my body, was upriver where for months after, this body supported my body's community's flood recovery. Space-time mattering of time's rainbow has hold on this body, my heart, and our upriver community's flood recovery. There are upriver places where I visit, and this body, my body, still performs its representations of its experiences of trauma. But I stand here in this bubble, in this place. My body wandered here to wonder about bubbles. This body, my body, thought it could disrupt time and place. But that's how it always works. But to apply a methodology of the heart and to understand the juxtaposition of this body, my body's night of joy and time of loss, juxtaposed by a rainbow of time. But as this body stands at this place, and as this body tries to remember its joys and losses, in this bubble of place, this body, my eyes read a plaque. Tens of thousands of years of stories that are not mine to hear. Yet I know they too have been disturbed by decades of histories hidden by colonizer dominance. This body, my privileged body's occupation of this place, manipulates its fingers and thumbs through Ron Pellias's methodology of the heart. Pellias ponders how bodies are missing from research. And when riffing on the ear as missing from research, reminds this non-Indigenous body of its ear. That straining ear that tilts in, presses against the fourth wall, listens in the dark because it is hard for the heart of hearing, for the heart of heart, for the hard. How can autoethnographers manage aesthetics of space-time mattering and time rainbows and place bubbles in our research? And I wonder about an aesthetic of place and listening of methodology of the heart of, thank you, Dr. Miriam Rose Dadiri, where there is stillness and listening. I listen. I listen. I listen at the point where I stand, a standpoint. A standpoint of critical whiteness study, of decolonizing histories and knowledges, of seeking to understand a place. I'm still, and I listen, and I contemplate, and I let the listenings I've listened to listen to each other at and from this standpoint, and I realize listening is agentic, and listening is activist, and listening is open to the aesthetics of time and place. This listening as method of the heart, activist listening, where listened learnings weave and intersect and where new meanings are made, new contemplative understandings. There's a chaos to my Western living, where living consists of personal commitments, professional obligations and desires, political engagement, familial and communal chores, loves, worries, joys. There are hours of labour and complexity of that labour. There's physical, cognitive and emotional labour. It's difficult to stop in one place. To stop in one place and stop. In amongst my labours and commitments and obligations and desires and loves and fears and joys, I struggled to conceive of an answer to the question, what consumes you in this bubble moment? And I walked and I thought about that. And I walked here and stopped and breathed and felt and listened and remembered joy and loving and losing at this place, the aesthetic of this place in different times, this space-time mattering and consideration of Aristotelian notions of a unity of place and the aesthetics of the unity of place. I'm conceiving of my bubble as an aesthetic of place, and then I'm considering how time and action impacts this bubble. How can an aesthetic of place be manipulated by time and action? Space-time mattering. Conceptualizing a bubble as an aesthetic of place and where time and action are a provocation. Thank you. And I'll stop sharing. What do I need to do?
Craig, look at all the love.
I'm just, I've been reading my script. I'm going back through the comments. Thank you. Oh, as I was listening to Jennifer before, I was making connections between what we're both going to say. But yes, I'm not sure if Dan is still there.
Yeah, I'm here, but
No, that's all right. Just wondering if we want to take some time to do questions, or have an early break, or have people in America have an early night or a night.
30.
I just want to say, Craig, that was just beautiful. And you just took us all on such a sensory journey, thoughtful and scholarly. Thank you so much for being you.
Thanks, Esther. It's great to see you too.
Just lovely. Thank you.
So I think all of us who've just presented are still here. If anyone has any questions, just shout out, call out.
I have a question.
Hey.
Curious with Corinna and Kelsey, what you mentioned, I think one of you mentioned what your favorite word might be that earlier, but I'm just curious, if all of you could share your favorite and perhaps one of the most difficult ones that you've encountered but really wanted to share based on your presentation.
Yeah, so my favorite was Zeep. That was it's Z-I-I-P, but it's pronounced Zeep. And then I think the hardest one is the Soyingoi. I think the hummingbird, I think that's the hardest one to say because it's not spelt like phonetically that way. Yeah, did you have a favorite, Denise?
Definitely Zeep.
Yes.
Very, very much my personality. Yes, I'm a squirrel on at least 4 cappuccinos, or excuse me, espressos.
I like Gamu as well, but I think the students that I was teaching this lesson with, their favorite was it was the porcupine, which we didn't put in there, but it was Yihani, and they were just always shouting it and doing different putting different emphases on different parts.
Kelsey, do you remember what special gift the squirrel had?
No.
They each have special gifts.
No.
I think it was speed. So I don't know, Denise, you needed a spirit animal today.
I need that spirit animal. Yes. Zeep, 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 zeep.
Well, and I guess for me, the hummingbird is a favorite, but also difficult. And I guess it's kind of a favorite because they're a whole new animal to me. And I've had them in my backyard over the last however many, few months, and they've just gone away. It's a bit sad because we just had snow this morning up on the mountain, so it's got a lot colder.
Can I ask a question, Corinna and team?
Yeah, sure.
I didn't get your whole presentation. I'm going to have to watch the recording. But for the Indigenous people that you worked with in this moment, what was the word or the creature that they really wanted to ensure that you storied with children?
Yeah, the story is called The Green Porcupine, and the main point of the story is that the creator gives all of the different animals different gifts, and that we shouldn't be upset or jealous of other people's gifts because we all have different gifts for a reason, and we're all special in our own ways.
Lovely, and I loved your quote too about the old lady that shared her stories. Yeah, it's just so important that we hear their voices. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Esther.
I will say that all of them are hard for me to pronounce because I am not practiced in like auditory processing, and much of the knowledge that has been passed down that they would like to be shared has been passed down orally. So That has been new for me. But I know also the lesson plan creators, the designers who worked with the native tribe, they found many different versions of every animal's word. So even there's many Shoshone tribes. The Northwestern Band happens to be the one in Utah. And even in their tribe, they had 2 or 3 different words for squirrel or porcupine. And getting that authority on what should be used to teach kids in school. So then it becomes, we had Brenda Beall, our coordinator, come into the classroom and let the students know this is really important that you say it correctly. And so I struggle learning that way, and I've never learned a new language. And so, but it's a gift to be able to participate in it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Heather. I'm terribly monolinguistic and have to work very hard with my pronunciation here, but I've got some very good Māori friends and colleagues who correct me. Cheers. It's a good journey to be on.
Julianna's got a hand up there.
Yeah, so I have my cat joining me, so it's usually not something I get to do at conferences. This is Lucy, by the way. I was really fascinated with the just like the very poetic way that you talked about walking, Craig. It was very, I felt like I was walking with you, and I definitely I felt this sort of connection between the way that you described yourself, because in many ways I personally identify with those descriptors, and it really felt like this process of unraveling colonization and expectations of certain bodies, and I think it's really cathartic, but also just so powerful, and I just wanted to applaud you for that amazing presentation. It gave me a lot of inspiration. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Julianna. Read Ron Pellier's Methodology of the Heart.
Yes, that's I read it a while back, but I'm definitely going to revisit it. So
yeah,
thank you. Yeah.
Do we have any other? Just having a scroll through. I don't see anyone else with a hand or a name in the chat with a question.
I thought I'd like to ask, is it Iiyea? Iiyea? Am I saying it?
Yeah, GA.
GA, excuse me. GA, I'm curious, it must be so hard being far from home. Yeah. And what were some of the things that your mother would say to you that rang in your mind over and over to keep you going?
Well, so like she always spent the time like her 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. the 1 hour to pray for me, because I'm from the background is like Catholic, so she always pray for the whole family, and the last day she always pray for like me, and then like their ultimate goal is for complete the degree, yeah, in a safe way and on time. That's what she always say. And also because like last year was really hard time for like everyone, right? And then for me also, so I would always spend like my time for like writing a diaries. Like I always like wrote a good cause on the top, and then like just feel like refresh on my mind, and then also like have best time with my parents. That really helped a lot.
Beautiful, thank you. I know that from my mom, she would send, she started sending me text messages just, before I would go to bed, telling me go to bed, but also sending me a little prayer as well that, so I think, I really felt that part of your sharing.
Oh, thank you.
I have a question for you as well, Gia. Did you have you always envisioned your Instagram as a diary, or did it evolve itself into a diary and then present it to you?
So the second one, because I always wrote a diary when I was in South Korea. It was like back to like 2018. But as I started the PhD program, it's really busy. You know, like I don't have any time to like jot down and do anything. So I just tried to, because you know, like Instagram is really quick and short and it's so like convenient. So all I need to do is just snapshot or like just, you know, take a photo and then just post it. That's all. So, and then it became a diary. Yeah. Then
I found the same thing happened to me when
I didn't expect it to share this photo for this conference. And yesterday, like I mean last week, I had a conversation with my friend, and she's also major in qual studies. And she told me that like her experiences of sharing her SNS and her photos and the postings on the qual conference. So she was like, why don't you share your Instagram postings to everyone to show like your critical autoethnography? Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm just getting the program up, and will I share my screen again, or just say it is coming up to 12:30? So wherever you are in the world, we've got about a 3.5 hour break. So I say it's 12:30 here in Brisbane and Melbourne, Sydney time. In 3.5 hours, it'll be 4 o'clock, and that's when paper session 3 starts. Whatever time zone you might be in, add 3.5 hours, and that's when we'll be starting off again with paper session 3. But aside from that, sleep well, travel well, eat well, whatever it is you're about to do it well, and we'll see you again sometime very soon. Thanks, everyone.
And thank you. They're all great. Thank you.
Hey, good to see you, Julie.
Good to see you, Craig. Yes. Maybe next year. Looking forward to next year when we do composting up in Brisbane.
I'm just looking at that painting in the background, which looks like a river of sorts. So
yes, it is. Yeah, I'll show it. Give you a closer view.
Oh, it looks like we're still recording. Do we want to keep it recording or?
I'll stop recording. Thanks for the prompt.
No worries. Oh my goodness.
So it's